Hi everybody, thanks for joining. Today I'm going to be sharing some experiences I have with alcohol inks and how to avoid getting that muddy color when blending them together. So I'm going to use a color wheel to show you how I do that. So let's go ahead and get started. So as I started thinking about how to do this, I thought it might be helpful to go back to basics, and I did my version of a color wheel. I wanted to try doing this with alcohol inks on Yupo paper, but basically here what I did is I started with a yellow, a red, and a blue, or the indigo here. And then what I did is I added the secondary colors, so my green, my orange, and my purple. And then I did the colors in between, in this case like a lettuce, the mermaid, wild plum, orange sunset. I wound up thinking these were two different colors, but they're actually the same. And the butterscotch wound up being kind of the intermediate color between those. You know, when I thought about the colors that I use, when you look back at other cards I've made, I tend to stick, without even thinking about it, in colors that really are close to each other on the color chart. And those colors for me tend to be kind of the red, the orange, the yellow. Sometimes I'll go the red, the purple, and then a lot of times the blue, the mermaid or pool colors, and then into the greens. And there's a reason for that. They just tend to work well together. Now, this doesn't mean, and I am certainly not an expert, but when I go in and I start practicing and playing around, which I encourage you to do, what this means is that you could use the orange and the mermaid, but you don't want to mix them too much where they're going to start to turn into what I like to call the mud zone. I'm going to show you just some ones as I started thinking about this and experimenting that I did. I wanted to pair this purple with lettuce, right? And then this is what I did here. So overall, if you think about it, now I did not use any blending alcohol. I literally just put the alcohol ink onto the paper, and I just wanted to see what they do. Now I did blow it around a little bit with my little air guy to get some movement, and so that's why you see that. You could do that with a straw, or some other mechanism to move the ink. Again, I'm going to show you what it looks like when I do some blending solution in a minute, but I just wanted to keep things pretty pure and see if it was a difference in how they performed. Then the next one I went and did was a mermaid and poppy field. So again, typically colors that wouldn't necessarily mix well together, and I put them here. So as you kind of start to see this middle ground where they blend, right, you do start to see this darkness to it. I wouldn't necessarily call it mud yet, but there is a darkness where they start really losing their true colors, which is what you want them to do. You want them to mix around a little bit, right? So here I have the orange sunset, and I have I think it's amethyst here is what I wound up doing. And you start to see this very darkness happening. To me, it's like, okay, not necessarily something beautiful that I would necessarily do on a card, but not awful. And then I started thinking, okay, well, let's try something that maybe fits a little closer together in their color chart. So I wind up using this purple twilight and mermaid. And so you see those here fairly close, right? Not too far apart. They start to have some overlap, which is darker, but you can still see the colors in them. And then I did the same here. I wound up taking sunshine yellow. No, actually I used butterscotch. And then I used wild plum. So butterscotch and wild plum. And interestingly enough, and I'll show you another card in a minute, it starts actually forming other colors in here, right? So you start to see, this is the butterscotch, and you start to see this almost red in here where it almost makes that poppy field color, which is actually up here. But it is not poppy field, and it's not a red. It's just the two colors coming together and making that. And then next I try the sunshine yellow with purple twilight and then limeade. Purple and greens, typically, I have not gotten them to really pair well together. So you start to see this muddiness occur. In my opinion, you can still see enough of the color because I haven't used blending solution, but you start to see this muddiness happen in here. Up in here, you've got some blending of the purple and more the yellow color, and it is starting to get a little muddy. Not necessarily what I would want to use, at least to create something. I really like bright colors. So then I thought, okay, let's try taking this one step further. And I have another piece of Yubo paper. It's a translucent one. And let's add some blending solution. You can see they're not as vibrant in color, right, compared to what's here. But you do start to see some more mudding of water. So I won't go through all the colors, but you can, start to see this was the the true colors, but then you start to see crossover. Sometimes it's a very dark color. So I'm sharing this just so you can decide what you want to do, and I've just experimented. Again, I encourage you to do the same. But then you start seeing this muddiness happen when you get into this green and purple, or the violet hues. So again, could you use this if this was your thing and this is what you liked? Yes, but if you're really looking for vibrancy of color, I think I would avoid mixing things that are more than a couple of steps away from each other, especially when you start blending them. What I had found in my experiments is if I went, maybe a couple away, it wasn't so bad. So if I did maybe an orange and a wild plum, I'd get some pretty colors. But as I start to venture into the indigo, not so much in my opinion. Again, you can see we started to do that over here, and you get this very dark color. Again, if that's what you're going for, then that might be a beautiful thing. A couple of examples that I had done in my past that I wanted to show, and then we'll start playing with some colors. Here's a card I was creating for another video that I had done. Interesting, on here when you look, you think that I probably used a lot of the poppy, which I used a little bit, but what I really used more of was the sunshine yellow, so you can see bits and pieces of it, along with the wild plum. And when the wild plum and the yellow, just like in the other card I showed, when they mix together, you start to see this red happen, right? And so that's what a lot of that card is. If you could see it here, you'll see them play out and start overlapping. Here's one I just did. It was never on camera, but it was using the blending brush, so you can kind of see those strokes. But what happened is, and this is the great thing about Yubo paper, is you can pretty much start over again. And that was the point where I think I had mixed like a mermaid, and I had put some like a yellow and green, and I just started putting too many colors, and you can almost see it here on the edge like an orange, and it really did not look so pretty to me. So I share this with you because if you over mix stuff, it does start to get really muddied down with this brown color. Okay, so let's go ahead and play around. You're going to need some Yubo paper, which we have here. And you probably already know this, but you don't want to touch Yubo paper. Your oils from your hands could affect, how it grabs onto the paper. So I'm going to show you what I did really on this card here, where I'm not going to use the blending ink on the first one, and I'm going to pull colors, up here, more or less in the order of the rainbow, from kind of this ultraviolet colors with purple through reds, yellows, greens, and into the blues. So let's try putting together amethyst, which I think is this one here, and I'll show you the limeade. So the purple and the greens. Let's try it. So there's green. And I'm going to let them just bloom on their own in this one. If we need to move it around a little bit, we can. And the amethyst. So you can see they start to commingle in the middle, but not too much. So it just gets a little darker in the middle, but for the most part, you can really see their colors still, right? So I'm going to do that. Let's do another one, and we'll just continue and let that one dry, but let's do another one. I won't do as much, where we're going to add a little bit of the blending solution, and let's see what happens. And before you do this, you want to make sure you're in a well-ventilated room, and you also have something covering your surfaces so it doesn't stain. So see how you start to get this browning effect? And to me, that's where I start to lose interest in the piece. So I would probably not use these colors together. I've just not been able to find where when they overlap, they remain beautiful. But if I started moving this around, I don't even know if we can get some movement here, but you can just start to see that the more the purple and the green get together, the more brown it looks. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, because we could try something where we throw in a different color too, and just see if that changes anything once it dries. So I'm going to put down some blending solution, and let's see, does this make a difference? So we got the green, and let's add the amethyst in here. So far, if they're not overlapping each other, they kind of stay in their color, right? Let's mix this up a little bit. You see this purple just really overtakes the green, and the green really becomes muddy in this case. So to me, if I were to use them together, just kind of based on the 3 techniques I tried, I'd probably stay where I did not use a whole lot of blending solution. Like here, I put it on after I laid the inks and let them kind of bloom for a minute. And then this one, where there's no blending solution, I think that could work, right? When you start getting into this, moving them together, I think it gets too muddied. But let's try taking another color and adding that in there. So we have limeade and we used amethyst. So let's try using wild plum, and let's see what happens. Let's put that just over top of it. That's the great thing about the alcohol inks. Again, you can kind of put a new color down and it pushes stuff out. So is this another option? So could you lay those 2 colors, and where there's this overlap of brown, could you add another color on and let it take over the space? The answer is yes, absolutely. So you can do that, and you don't see this browning effect, right? But it does push the other ink out. Again, not a bad thing. It just depends on what it is that you're going for. So that's an option for you too. So a lot of that brown is now gone, and something's replaced it. Let's see what happens. Let's try putting some blending solution down here. And let's put some of this in. When I was making these cards, I do know that yellow gets pushed out very easily. So you have to come back and let things dry and put the yellow back down. But as soon as you put something like any sort of red tone to it, or the purple, because it's very heavy in red and blue, it will push the yellow out. So I think what you see for green is kind of more of a passive color. So you can start with it, but as you layer these inks, if you choose to do that, I think you need to come back and put the green. So we're going to try that and see what happens here. So most of this green is gone except for a little bit on the edges, and it does look pretty murky compared to these other 2 greens. And again, this is a very vibrant green, so you could always go in, maybe we can try the lettuce. Anything you put over tends to push the other ink out. So here we're starting to see some real more muddiness. So even though it's pushing the ink out, it doesn't push it all out, and you start getting the loss of that green color still. Okay, let's use the original green. Let's dry this up. Okay, you can see bits of it, but let's see if we can get some more in there. This one again is a little bit brighter. The other one has a little bit more yellow in it. Here's my take on it. My take is, I say, do what you find beautiful. One, I think you should always do that in art. But two, just remember as you think about colors and where they sit in that color wheel, some are going to blend better than others, and you may have a high tolerance in your work of saying, listen, I don't care if it gets a little muddy, because in the end you do see the colors I want them to, want you to see. So you can always, this part in here where it's pretty brown, you could always come back and try to put a little bit of blending solution in there and see if you can push some of that out, versus have it turn more brown. So I think there's a lot of different things you can do, but I will say this, I find the more blending solution I use, the more muddy it will get. So it does not usually get better. I think at some point you can overdo alcohol ink. I think that if you're feeling like it isn't what you need, maybe wipe the slate clean and try it again. You can reuse Yubo paper. If you don't like the color, just put some blending solution or alcohol down, and most of it will wipe away. You'll have a staining, but that's okay. You lay the color over it, you won't ever see the stuff that was underneath. But again, I find the more you work it and overdo it, the worse it gets. And when you start using more and more colors like the purple and the reds, the more they will overtake something like the yellows and the greens. And the yellow and the red together will make a beautiful orange. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, make yourself a color wheel with the inks that you have. Start with your primary colors and then add your secondaries in, and then add, the ones that are in between that. I think that will help guide some of maybe your decisions, and a lot of what you should do is just have fun trying and see what works, because like I said, typically would not pair well together if you don't use a blending solution or a whole lot of movement in the ink. I think they do look beautiful together, and you can add other colors in here, and I think that is pretty cool to be able to do that. Again, if you go back to this one, too many colors, but you get the idea, where some of the colors would not normally pair well together. If I didn't overblend it, they actually don't look too bad. So hopefully you find this video helpful. If you do, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Let me know your comments. Have you tried this before? Have you run into this muddiness? Did you try color combinations, or maybe a different way that you got them to work that I didn't try today? Comment below, let me know. And if you're interested in videos like this in the future, please go ahead and hit subscribe and the alert. Thank you so much. Have a great day.